Good afternoon. I was asked to say a few words about cultural diplomacy, and Denmark is, I think, very good in that area. Denmark is a small country. It knows that it can only exert soft power in most situations, and it brings to bear all of its cultural background and its respect around the world for the kind of country that it is to bear on that. So it has a relatively formalised approach to cultural diplomacy. There are serendipitous aspects, of course, where some things just catch the public interest in other countries, but overall there's a fairly top-down strategic driver to the Danish efforts in this area. There is a Danish agency for culture and palaces. This is an executive agency of the government funded and controlled by the Ministry of Culture and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This agency produces a strategic framework which is reviewed every 2 to 3 years. The framework sets out what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs sees as the important targets for cultural diplomacy abroad, be that subject areas or places. These important areas translate into guidance to other organisations to steer decisions on funding artists and projects. Organisations that are suitably established can apply for funding. That includes the embassies around the world. So, for example, at the Edinburgh International Festival Fringe, which finished just a couple of weeks ago, there were a number of Danish performers who were funded through the embassy in London in partnership with a production company in Copenhagen called Wildtopia. One of the largest funding organisations who distribute grants is the Danish Arts Foundation. This organisation funds around 6,000 artists and projects a year and has a budget of between 65 and 70 million euros. It has an international programme which allows foreign artists to apply for Danish funding. The Nordic Council of Ministers also has a budget for arts projects of about 20 million euros. In addition to government-funded projects, there are other initiatives. The Danish Cultural Institute is independent, but does, in fact, receive a fair amount of its money from the Agency for Culture and Palaces, as well as private sources like the Carlsberg Foundation. It has got a budget of about 4 million euros. Although this all sounds very calculated and deliberate, within this framework, artists do have considerable freedom of expression and content. Denmark is very liberal and has minimal censorship, and that's enshrined in law. One challenge this creates is that often Danish artists find that abroad they are pushing the boundaries of what some cultures might find acceptable. As I mentioned at the start, in spite of all this carefully thought through directed activity, cultural exports always have a potential to surprise. Annette Bach, one of the section heads in the Agency for Culture and Palaces, was asked by a journalist what did she think was the most significant cultural export of Denmark in the last couple of decades. As Bach paused for a second to think about it, the journalist wondered, would it be the triumphal tour by the Royal Danish Ballet, the Danish Philharmonic Orchestra, perhaps? No. Borgen, Bach replied. For those who don't know, Borgen is a mainstream political television drama series about a fictitious first Danish female Prime Minister. And the episode in which the Prime Minister goes over the side with her driver had record viewing figures in 5 countries for a subtitled television drama. So cultural diplomacy doesn't need to be highbrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much.